My name is Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. I haven't found necessary to have a drink since, thank you. I haven't found necessary to have a drink since January 25th, 1981. I was listening to a tape I did like in 15 years ago. At that time, I thought my last drink was January 17th. I had been speaking all around the circuit saying my last drink was January 17th, 1981. One day I looked it up on the calendar. Of course, I was told it was Super Bowl Sunday. That's all I remembered. 1981, I saw it was it was January 25th, not January 17th. So I had all these tapes out there saying January 17th, and I'm saying to myself, it's weird how this alcoholism, how it comes to you out of the blue. I said, well, it wasn't January 17th, it was January 25th. So now I'm debating, well, now I got to say January 25th. But what if somebody listens to a tape where I said January 17th? Then not that I give a shit what other people think about me. So I went through I basically finally, thank God, I said I'm just going to tell the truth and let the chips fall when they may. So if you happen to listen to a tape like from 2006, like somebody told me today, that's when I really did the steps. And you listen to one of those tapes, it's going to say January 17th. So that's the deal on that one. But in any event, so it's good to be. I have to go. I'm going on a cruise. I'm flying over to Athens, jumping on a boat. We're going on a 15-day, sort of like AA cruise. It's about 600 people, and 100 of them are AA to the Holy Land and Turkey and Egypt and Israel and Rome, all this sort of stuff. And with my wife and a bunch of people. And so I only have like 2 more weeks here. So I'm gonna mush in 8. I'm gonna do 8 and 9, and I'm gonna do 10 and 11. Which I can do. I'm gonna do this thing. It's gonna happen. Okay, we'll see how it goes, and then I'll do step 12, and that'll be the deal. And you can get somebody else that actually knows what they're talking about, and we're gonna see. I like walking the tightrope. I like just sort of going out there. I don't plan anything. Just go out there and get on the tightrope, and tell them your testimony, and let the chips fall with them. So how do you think let's see. This is gonna be like fun. It'll be like an experiment. You'd be like guinea pigs, you know what I mean? Like I go out there, and I'm going to talk about step 8, and I'm going to talk about step 9, and I'm going to weave, somewhere in there, I'm going to weave something about God. Because I've been talking to him for 7 weeks, you guys figure out like I'm pretty much a God. It all ends up talking about God. I just want to talk about God. I don't want to talk about these step things. There's a reason for that. And I know you're here saying, no, I came here to hear about the steps. I don't want to hear about God, but I'm going to figure that thing out. What I want to do, what I really want to do, what I always ask the Lord to help me do, is not only talk about what's on my heart, just be sincere about this thing, but I want to tell you something that maybe you've never heard before. That's what I want to do. I don't want people to walk out of here and saying, oh man, same old crap in AA, the same old drunk list. I want somebody to say, I never heard that shit before. I don't even care if they walk and they say, I hate that guy. At least I've got them hating me, you know what I mean? Like they're thinking about me, you know what I'm talking about? That's kind of cool, so I'm going to come up with some crazy stuff. We were talking in the car on the way over here with Jim. He told me not to share this. He told me, he said, don't share that at co-ed meetings. And I said, no, I'd never share that at co-ed meetings. And I said, I'm going to share that. So, anyway, like we suffer from alcoholism, and that, what was it? It's like an evil haunting. It's like an obsession you can't stop thinking about. And along with a craving that you got to have one, you got to have more, right? And which you got, your whole life revolves around it. It like takes over your life, the booze, right? You know what I mean? You can't stop thinking about it. You crave it, and it always leads somehow. It gives you somehow some sort of pleasure, and it somehow always leads to total destruction. And he says, yeah, that's it. I said, like women. And we have an allergy. We have some of you, if you're like me, I had an allergy. That's what Dr. Bach told. I think I have an allergy to women. Because it's the same deal. I was totally obsessed. You know what I mean? Totally craved. Always led to destruction. You know what I mean? And you don't like that, right? But you'll remember it. Not only will you remember it, a lot of you people, and the same thing with women and men, a lot of you people will walk out of here and you'll be thinking about that shit. Long after this thing is done, you'll say, holy shit, men or women for me was just like the booze. And then you're going to start seeing shit that you never saw before. You're going to start understanding what this disease is all about and lusting for the things of this world. And one day you're really going to surrender to that deal. And then you're going to be rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. And you're going to realize that guy Russell wasn't so crazy after all. Just I'm not here to talk about the drinking problem because nobody has a drinking problem. Nobody needs to have a drinking problem. I'm here to talk about the thinking problem. So Tommy was the guy I sponsored. We were prosecutors in the state attorney's office. We were both division chiefs. We used to try murder cases together. And I came to AA and he came in 3 years later. So he called me up on the phone. And I'm not called me up. He called me up and he was strung out, living on a probation officer's floor. He had his hair down. He was a jock from the University of Florida. A good-looking guy, jock, tall guy, like a John Wayne type. His hair was down here. He was wearing old jeans, a T-shirt, and he was like a mess. He was supposed to show up in court. He couldn't make it to court. I had to call the chief judge and get him out of that deal. And then I came and I picked him up and I brought him to an AA meeting. And he was divorced. He had a kid, but it was over for him. It was over for him like it was over for me. But he was a drinking buddy of mine. We used to sit there, I'll never forget. He's got like 39 or 40 years now. But we sat down there and we used to sit in the bar, and it would be like 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd be the only guys in the bar, looking for the women, the only guys in the bar. And I'd turn to him and I'd say, Tommy, I feel it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm in Omaha, and I don't know anything about Omaha, but I sort of felt that Omaha's like that. 3 o'clock in the morning all by yourself, with a couple of cows or something. And so I was sitting there with, so Tommy, I took him to an AA meeting, and he's like one of these guys, I may have been sort of like, he took to this thing, man, I'll tell you, the next day he got his hair cut, he got his clothes on, he looked like the jock, and he loved AA. He'd go to 1, 2, 3 meetings a day, we were hanging out together, he was doing incredible. Even though he couldn't practice law, he was still a lawyer. He started working for a guy in A, working in a lead factory, because he didn't want to get involved with that, because he didn't want anything to hurt his sobriety. He was like doing everything by the numbers, reading the big book, doing everything, and sober. So one day, right before a meeting, I get a phone call from Tommy. And he says, this on the phone call, he says, Russell, he says, what? I says, and he like whispers, like he doesn't want someone to hear, like he says, I think I have to leave AA. I said, I'm sorry, what'd you say? I says, I think I have to leave AA. You can't make this stuff up. And I said, Tommy, what are you talking about? He says, I think I have to leave AA. He says, what do you mean? He says, I don't think I'm an alcoholic. I said, Tommy, 3 months ago, you were sleeping on a probation officer's floor. You had your hair down to here. You were strung out on cocaine and booze. You couldn't stop drinking. I took you to an AA meeting. You've been going for 3 months to AA meetings. You're sober. You're clean. You're doing great, and you're happy. And every meeting you go to, you say, "My name's Tommy. I'm an alcoholic." You know what I mean? And what do you mean? He says, I know. He says, I know, you're right. He says, I know. He says, but I think I gotta leave. I don't think alcohol's my problem. I said, what are you talking about? He says, listen. And then he whispers even lower. He says, I think I might just be crazy. And I said, Tommy, listen. He says, what? He says, listen. He says, what? He says, you can be both. He said, really? I said, absolutely. I says, oh, thank God. I thought I had to leave. So I'm 31 years old, and I'm divorced, having ripped the heart out of a whole bunch of people, including my wife, and leaving my son in my, quote, bachelor pad, where I was going to be Hugh Hefner of Miami, which in order to do that, you have to be able to stand up for a while and not wobble. And it didn't work out. And I was 31 years old. I thought my life was over. Now, unless you've been to this spot that I got to, they talk about it in different parts of the big book. You'll know loneliness as few do. And my life was a mess. The walls were closing in on me. It was coming at me faster than I knew how to handle it. I was without any hope. I knew my life was over 31 and it was never going to get better again. and I was lonely. Lonely is not even a good word for what I was. I don't even know. Lonely. I'm like beyond Pluto. And there's nobody and that could be in a stadium with 50,000 people. It doesn't matter. There was nobody I could call. There's nobody I could explain. There's nobody I could talk to. One of the reasons, I think, being because what would I say to him? I had no clue as to what the problem was, but I had every clue as to what the problem was, but I knew I couldn't explain it because nobody could possibly understand what was going on because I was totally unique. And I had and I had some sort of crazy, I was crazy. It was over. My life was over, and there was nobody I could talk to. There was nobody I could go to. And I was alone. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I turned on TV, and some preacher showed up and, talked about Jesus for me. I mean, this is just my story. You don't have to do this, but talk about Jesus. And my sponsors say, don't rob an alcoholic of his desperation. Every alcoholic has to have his last drink. And circumstantially, I still had my job, I still had a car, I still had a place to live, but my life was had turned into a bottle. My whole life was about a bottle. I'd come home and drink, I'd sit by the phonograph, I'd feel sorry for myself, waves of self-pity. No way I couldn't get out. I couldn't escape, and so you don't know what to do. And this guy says, you want out, you want a new life. He gave, whatever. He did what we did. He said, this is what it was like. This is what happened. This is what it's like now. You want to feel different? He says, get on your knees, give your life to Jesus, say this prayer. I did it, which is not a big deal for some people. For a Jewish kid from Great Neck, New York, it was a huge deal. You know what I mean? But it's hard to explain unless you've been there. I did it. I made the confession. I didn't examine the life preserver. I didn't say, I don't know whether I can do this one. I don't know whether I can do that one. I can do this or that and the other thing. I just did it. I got up. Now, I'd like to say, 3 rabbis and a priest came down with a bunch of cookies and some coffee. Hey, we got an A meeting going on over here. But that's not what happened. What happened is I continued to drink. And about 30 days later, I got into a vicious car accident where I almost killed myself and somebody else. And I was on a hospital gurney being wheeled into a hospital room. And I looked up at the ceiling and I said, God help me. I said, God help me, and something happened. I can't explain what it is. I'm not going to even go into it. I had a spiritual experience. I would say almost an out-of-body experience. I know I'm not the only one who's had something like this. I'm not saying you have to have this, but I had it. And a couple of days later, somebody came to the hospital, and I had my last drink January 25th, 1981. It was Super Bowl Sunday. And then I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was that deal. So I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I stopped drinking. I put the plug in the drug. I had the obsession for a while. I don't know if it's for a week or a month or whatever it is. I had that thing where you're either thinking about drinking or you think about how you're not drinking, which is almost as bad as thinking about drinking as thinking about how you're not drinking. You're in a bar and you're in a restaurant and you're not drinking and you're thinking about how everybody else is drinking. Or you're looking at everybody else's glass, and they would have like wine sitting there in a glass and not drinking it, and you'd feel sorry for the wine. You're like abusing that wine. He wants to drink. He wants to join his buddies in your stomach. And you just because it's all about the booze. But the day came, and I'm not going to go through this because that's not what we're about. We're about 8 and 9. The day came that the obsession, the evil haunting of the alcohol left. And all that stuff left, and I started our wonderful journey of physical sobriety. Don't drink even if your ass falls off. Don't drink and go to meetings. It's all about the drinking. Don't drink and go to meetings. That wonderful journey we go through in Alcoholics Anonymous, dealing with life and the vagaries of life, and our mind, not understanding at that point, you see what I knew, what I had somehow put together, which I think many alcoholics put together. They put it together. And I think it's important to put this together. I put together the fact that my life was totally unmanageable. I got that. And I put together that it was unmanageable because I could not stop drinking. Which I think is like a big deal in step 1. In other words, I knew my life was unmanageable, and it was unmanageable because I could not stop drinking, and I actually ultimately got the fact that I couldn't stop drinking because I was powerless over alcohol. Now, the part in the book about where it says the drinking is but a symptom of our disease, The real disease centers in our mind, not our body. It's not the drinking. It's the fact that we're crazy. The thing that Tommy noticed 3 months after he stopped drinking, I didn't get that, not so much on that one. I didn't get that one so much, you know. The crazy takes some time. The real alcoholism, what the disease, what you're suffering, the reason you go to meetings now, you got 10 years, you got 20 years, you got 30 years, has nothing to do with drinking. Now I know some old asshole in the back is saying, no, it's a plug in the drug, you don't drink, I understand that. I'm cool with that. I understand. My sponsor said it's good to say to newcomers, it's true. You go through a whole day, you screw up everything, you're an idiot, but you haven't had a drink, you're a winner. Yeah, we got to hear that stuff. I get that. That's the spiritual kindergarten. That's the not drinking club. I get that. It's important to hear that. It's important for you to know that. But anybody who's been around for a while knows, like Tommy was to find out 3 months later, that we're fucking crazy. You understand? That we are insane. That the reason we need to be restored to sanity is because we're insane, because sane people don't need to be restored to sanity. You understand? And so what happens is, here's the real problem. It's not the drinking. It's not even being powerless, because I'm not powerless. I have the power to rip your heart out. I have the power to disappoint you. I have the power to get in the car and drive from here to there. I have power to spend money. I have a power to hurt myself, hurt other people. And you know something? And it's not that I need a higher power. I got 1,000,000 higher powers. Everything's a higher power to me. Good looking gal. I'm married, but I see a good looking. It's a higher power. Money, higher power. My whole life is about chasing around higher powers that are more important than me. You know what I had to find? You know what I didn't have? But all these powers that were around me, linked with my power, my self-will-run riot, caused, you know what it led to? Spiritual and physical death. What I had to find, and I didn't realize this until many years later. As a matter of fact, I didn't realize it until 3 weeks ago. The reason I didn't realize it until 3 weeks ago, you know, there's a line in the book, 3 weeks ago, I'm in my 42nd years. There's a line. I mean, I know about this, but I didn't know how to put it into words. You know, there's a line, a great line. I have it in one of my emails that I send out. It says, a man, I think it's from the Oxford group. He says, a man can look at something 999 times and not see it, and look at it the 1,000th time and see it for the first time. You know how many times in Alcoholics Anonymous I've read parts of the big book, of the 12 and 12, or Dr. Bob Goodall, or some sort of either constant proof or even the Bible or something, and I see a line that I've read 50,000 times, heard it in a group, and I sort of sloughed over it. You know, like most people slough over lines, like, you know, abandon yourself to God, and, you know, you slough over, you know, half measures of that, let's not talk about it. You know, the God stuff you slough over, don't worry about the God thing. You know, all the God stuff that you read it, and you know it's there, but, you know, it's like not that important. You know, the fact that you'll be rocked in the fourth dimension, exists, experience much of heaven, the great fact exists nonetheless, that God becomes the central factor of my, you know, you be convinced that he lives in, all that stuff that you read it, it's not like you don't know what's there. You know, you nod your head, but, you know, that's not important. What's important is step 4. What's important is step 5. All that other stuff about the God thing, you know, that thing where they read, what you ultimately learn is that to get the things that most people will not get in here, you got to do the things that most people will never do. And they'll never do it because they never really surrender. Yeah. And one of the things you realize in the big book, it says, if you do what we do, you'll get what we got. It says, really, haven't seen for failures thoroughly followed our path. And one of the things they did in the path is they say we encourage church membership. We encourage you hang around people that are reading the Bible or reading something or going, trying to get closer to God. But then it says in the very bottom, for various reasons, we won't go in there. He says, well, of course, this is optional, but it wasn't optional for them. This is what they did. This is what they did. And the reason they put it in the book is because they were encouraging it. They say we encourage it. But what happens is 99% of people in AA don't want to hear it and don't want to do it. But what I found out is to get to the real gold, you got to be willing to do the extra credit shit. It's like the Olympics, you know. It's like, you know, you're either going to be in the stands watching the football game, or you're going to be part of the team down below. 50,000 people in the stands, you know, a lot of people, tons of people. When I came in, they said 1/1% make over 20 years, 1 in 200. And based upon all the meetings I've been through quite a few, gazillions of people with up to 20 years. hardly anybody with over 40 years. And A's been around for 90 years. And between 20 years and 40 years, nobody. Comparatively, you know? And you go to a room with 2, 3, 4, 500 people, there'll be 3 or 4 people with 40 years, a few with 30 years. You know, you can go down. If you have a chart in a room, you'll always see 1 year a bunch, 2 years a bunch, 3, 6 years, 7, 15, 10, and then all of a sudden it gets into the 20s. Then you get like one guy with 21, one guy with 27, somebody with 32, you know, maybe somebody with 40. It's like there's a drop off. And the truth of the matter is, based upon what I've seen in here, and this is just my opinion, so you could throw it in the toilet, we worry about, you say the newcomer's the most important person in the room. What about the guy with 11 years who's about ready to drink? What about the guy with 20 years who's about ready to drink? What about the guy with 15 years who's about ready to drink? To me, there's 10 times more. I wager that there are more people with over 10 years that are going to drink before they hit 20 than newcomers who are drinking. What do you think about that? You ever gone to me and say, I used to have 12 years, I used to have 10 years, I used to have 5 years, I've been around for 40 years, you ever hear, how many times have you heard that? Now, you understand? Now, you'll have a guy who said I had 3 months and I drank, or I've been trying to do this for a long time, who finally gets it together, and he gets a year or 2 or 3 or 4, but how many guys do you see? You know, you hear a lot of people that have time to drink. So this kind of stuff. So what I did was I happened to read. So I understand there's powerless and then there's powerless, but I'm not powerless, am I? I have the power to kill myself and destroy myself. Paul Menisher said alcoholics are men and women who have destroyed themselves. I have the power to destroy you. That's why they have Al-Anon. They've all been destroyed by me. They met me in an elevator. They haven't joined a meeting. You know, they go to meetings for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? They can't understand why. I'm just driving them crazy. We have to. So, and I don't have to worry about a higher power because everything in my life is a higher power that draws me. Worldly clamors, mostly within myself. Worldly, you know what that means? That's clamors in the world. Have you been out there? Do you see what's going on? Do you have any idea? It's all about what I don't have, what I wish I had. Why don't I have this? If only I had that and this. It's not about, so what is this power thing? And then I just read something in the book the other day and said, oh shit, I didn't realize that. And I've seen it a million times. He said we had to find a power by which we could live. We had to find a power. It's a specific power. It's not just a power. It's a power by which we could live. It's not a power by which we could die. It's not a power by which at 20 years we're going out drinking again. It's not a power by which we link up and get married to a crazy person or hang around stupid people. It's not a power by which we can go out and buy crap we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. It's a power by which we could live. Just remember that. It's a specific power. And the big book says, this has become important in the end, because the big book says there is one who has all power. There's one who has that power. Only one. Only one. And the name of that one that has all power is God. May you find him now. Or, like I like to, you better find his ass now. You better find that. You better find him. You better make sure it's not a power by which you could die. You better make sure it's the right power. A power to sort of change you. Faith that works. A faith that works. And a faith that works and a power by which you can live is not necessarily the same thing as a power which stops you from drinking. That's what I learned. A lot of people can link up to a power. You better make sure the thing that you call the power by which you can live is not you talking to you. Not a power you just kind of made up because you feel comfortable with it. Because the power by which you may live might be a power that at times makes you feel uncomfortable. It might be a power that sometimes spanks you. It might be a power that tells you crap that you don't want to hear. You know, it might be, you never know what that power is going to be. You better make sure, and somewhere, and you know, God has a great way of kind of showing alcoholics when they're on the wrong track. Have you guys experienced it at all? Have you guys living this life as alcoholics ever experienced, you know, that incredible power which somehow allows you to say to yourself, what the fuck is wrong with me? Even though you're not drinking for 5 or 10 years? So here's the deal. Like Tommy, I got to the point where I started feeling it. No, alcoholics are very sensitive, or as my sponsors would say, they're touchy. And we have strong, intense feelings. Feelings of loneliness, feelings of resentment, feelings of self-pity, feelings of guilt, feelings of fear, feelings of anxiety, same as fear. We have feelings of lust, feelings of greed, feelings of anger, I'm probably missing a bunch, but they all sort of fall into there, and we have the intense feelings. And here's the deal. I never experienced that shit when I was drinking. I'm not saying I never experienced it. Obviously, I didn't like catch it. I didn't come day and stop drinking, all of a sudden catch this shit. You know what I mean? This is the dis-ease that centers in my mind, not my body. This is the real alcoholism, not the drinking. The drinking is a symptom of my alcoholism. You know? The drinking is a symptom. The real dis-ease is these feelings. But the thing is, the reason why I never experienced it, and why you never experience it when you're drinking, drugging, smoking dope, getting laid, and all sort of stuff, is because as soon as the feelings come up, you say, this is what I used to say, I need a drink. You ever say, man, I need a fucking drink. I need a drink. And then you take a shot, and man, that's why I'm an alcoholic. No woman, no car, no amount of money ever quite as fast as just a few drinks. But women work. Sex works. Cars work. Spending money you don't have works. All this other stuff works. It all works. Getting a new job works. Losing weight works. You know, getting a new suit works. It all works. It just doesn't work as fast as alcohol. Isn't that quite available, you know? Alcohol's so much better. First of all, unlike some gals that I used to go out with, it doesn't talk back to you. You know what I mean? You could sit there with Tommy, and you can drink and make believe that you're surrounded by 10,000 women. You know what I mean? You can have a great imagination. You can imagine yourself incredible and wonderful, you know? You can imagine yourself Superman. You can make believe you're anything, you know? You can look down on people when you have nothing going on for you. I mean, alcohol is the greatest thing in the world. But now the alcohol is gone, and you're left with the feelings. And so one day, you call up your sponsor, and your name is Tom, and you say, I think I have to leave AA, and say, what's the matter with me? He says, I think I may just be crazy, because now you're experiencing all those feelings, and you're overwhelmed. You don't know what to do, and here's the problem. The one thing you never dealt with is self-awareness. You never dealt with, you don't even know what these feelings are. I mean, you can't even put a name to it. You know, you can't, because our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. We can't separate the true from the false. So you don't even know you're scared. Like the guy comes to my office, he says, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. He says it for 10 minutes. I say, I understand what the problem is. He says, yeah. He says, you have fear. He says, no, I didn't say that. He says, I didn't say that. He says, well, you just told me you're worried about it. He says, yeah. He says, anxiety is the same thing as fear. He said, well, I didn't know that. And we're not talking about an idiot. We don't even understand, or all we know is we feel restless, irritable, discontented, but we don't even know what the hell. Is it guilt? Is it fear? Is it worry? Is it remorse? It's because we don't know. Because every time we had this thing where we wanted to kill ourselves or kill somebody else or bad thoughts about it, we just said, what? I need a drink. I need a drink. You never had to deal with it. Think about it. You go to psychiatrists and they say, oh, I can help you, chew on this stuff, fix you up, just take one of these things every 6 hours or something, tell me how it works, So now you start going in this program we have. And this program you get to learn about, you have all this testimony. And what's the testimony about? If you're lucky, you hang around people that are talking about emotional sobriety. So they're talking about things like fear. They're talking about things like guilt. They're talking about things, anxiety. They're talking about lust. They're talking about, they're talking about self-pity. They're talking about all these feelings and these emotions and stuff. And you say, man, I got that. I felt like that. I'm doing that. I'm spending money I don't have to buy. I'm doing all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden you start being able to realize sort of like what's going on in your brain, which is kind of scary, because what's happening in your brain is happening at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and there's 10,000 voices all talking bad shit about yourself and other people. And now you're sort of like, at least you can categorize it. There's some sort of, I don't know how to relief in knowing that it doesn't feel good to be scared, but there's some sort of relief in at least knowing you're scared. Because you could actually put it, you say, I'm afraid. You can talk to them and say, I'm in fear. What are you scared of? The first step in getting out of jail is knowing you're in jail in the first place. If you don't know you're in fear, or you don't know you have a problem with lust, if you don't know you have these problems, you can't work. And that's when they say we get a new perspective. We get new perspectives. You know how we get a new perspective? The process of getting a new perspective? It says in the book, unbelievably painful. Has anybody ever gone through some pain and sobriety? Welcome to the program. That's how we get a new perspective. It's unbelievably painful. Final crushing of our self-sufficiency. Then we surrender again and we learn more. So I'm in my 42nd year. So all that means is I've had 42 years of having the crap beat out of me by this disease and life and not drinking and having to deal with it and trying to find the answer. Because even if you get like an answer, it's like line upon line, tittle upon tittle. It's small little, every meeting, you get a small little answer. Every once in a while you have an epiphany, Just a little something, and that's what happens. These little, small answers, your perspective changes a little. You get maybe involved in inspirational thinking. It seems sort of strange at first. It soon becomes a working part of the mind. You start knowing yourself. That's what the fourth step is all about. That's what the fifth step is all about. And even though there's a fourth step and the fifth step and all these steps, and it gives you a little bit of knowledge about yourself, in the end, and I'm just telling you from personal experience, in the end, at my age right now, 73, and my 42nd year, in the end, when you look at all of it, and all the changes that have happened, and all the new perspectives, and everything that's happened to me, and how I look things, and how I discern things, and how, and how I see things, how they're clear to me, stuff that was never clear to me before, which resulted in being rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, of experiencing much of heaven, of not being in fear of what other people think about me, or money or anything like that. Not that it's perfect, but you know what I mean? You're on the uphill thing, at least the downhill thing. There's a big difference between waking up every morning and being scared of what the hell is ahead and worried about what's ahead, and going to sleep at night being scared what's happening the next morning, and having a little anxiety once a month, for a half an hour. It's just it's a different type of thing, you know what I mean? And so somehow, somewhere along the line, you do all this, but when you see the whole picture, when they say you're too close to the forest to see the trees. When you scoot back and you see everything that's happened to you and how you changed, you understand something. That this incredible change, this profound personality change, where ideas, emotions, attitudes where the primary focus of your mind are moved over, and you have a whole new set of ideas, emotions, attitude, because you're completely taken over by a whole new force. When you see what's happened to you and how you've changed, you just know. And I don't even know how to put this in words, so I'll just say you just know that although the steps of the program were necessary, the steps are not the power. The steps are not the power. AA is not the power. Your sponsor is not the power. None of this stuff I'm talking about is the actual power. And a lot of people walk in here and they think the power is the fourth step. If this time I'm going to really do a perfect fourth step, you know? I've done 10 fourth steps, and now I'm going to do the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, the perfect whatever, and all this sort of stuff, that if I can only do the steps perfectly, I'll be okay. And AA is littered with people that have done the steps, who stayed sober for 20, and they're drinking again. Because they missed the whole point of the steps. And so somewhere along the line, so you take all these steps, and you learn what, and the steps, for me, what you realize is whatever change has happened to me is because of the power of God. Because there's one who has all power, and that one is God. And what the steps do, if they're going to do anything for you that's going to be permanent in nature, they're going to open up an avenue, they're going to open up a highway so that the power of God can come into you and change you. That's what the steps do. What's they're designed to do, so that the power of God can come in and change you. And so one of the things that I had to change, that you have to that I had to understand about, is this concept of an interesting concept, a concept of guilt and worry and fear of other people and what other people are thinking about me, which is real and which I have. And so the bottom line is that one of the things I had, now here's the interesting, now listen, I'm just going to throw this out. You can do whatever you want to do with it, okay? So I take this 8th step, which is just merely making a list. It's making a list. And the list comes on the 4th step. The 4th step and some other things, because there were some people on my 8th-step list that weren't on my 4th-step list. You make a list, okay, of the people you harm. It's on your 4th-step list. You've gone over it in the 5th step. You've talked to your sponsor. You make a list of these people. And then after you make a list of these people, what happens is then you go out. This is like this is ready for this. This is following directions. This is following directions. In Dr. Bob the Good Old Timers, this is what Clarence said. I think I've mentioned this before, but it's right in Dr. Bob the Good Old Timers, when he was 12-step. Dr. Bob went in to see Clarence. He was 135 pounds, he was like 31 years old, and he says, "Do you believe in God?" He says, "What does that do?" He says, "Everything." He says, "I guess I do." Guess nothing. You either believe in him or you don't. Okay, I believe in him. Good, now we're getting somewhere. You're down on the hospital bed, and I want you to say a prayer. I don't know how to pray. Doesn't matter. I'll tell you what to say. He tells him what to say, gets down on his knees. I give my life over to God, whatever it is, stands up. And then Clarence says, that's how Clarence was 12-step. And this is what Clarence says. You ready? He said, this is right in the book, in our conference-approved book. Crap, I'm not going to go into that stuff. It's right in the book. It says, "I did what I was ordered to do. There was no suggestion." Now, the reason why we say here are the 12 suggestions, we all know why they say here's the 12 suggestions, because the chief characteristic of alcoholics is defiance. And so we say suggestions because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And by making them the 12 suggestions, we're hoping that people will lighten up, and over a period of 10 or 20 or 30 years, maybe they'll get it. Unfortunately, they don't realize that the disease of alcoholism is really, really strong. And no matter how many times you hope they'll get that, and eventually they'll be able to call God by his name and all that sort of stuff, most alcoholics will not get it because they think they're just suggestions. They think all the stuff they're telling is just suggestions. And the truth of the matter is they may have been better off, I don't know, by saying, if you want to be here, this is what you have to do. Like in the good old days, where you couldn't go to a meeting where you had to get on your knees. Where you were actually told, this is what you do, and you're so low, and you've given up so much that you do whatever you're told to do. And you follow directions, and you do it. You understand? And then hopefully your mind will catch up to it. I'm not here to say whether that's good, bad, or whatever. It's the way it is. I'm sure that's the way God wanted it to be. But I can tell you this. I think one of the benefits I had of hitting bottom and constant deflation and constant ego deflation is so that you ultimately will follow directions and stop with this bullshit. I'm on the phone with a guy who went to jail for like 15 years, okay, for the hit-kill homicide. He's out now on probation, whatever it is, 15 years probation. He's got to stay sober. So I'm on the phone with him. I said, "How many meetings you go?" He's got into a little trouble, blah, blah, blah. I said, "How many meetings you going to?" He says, 2 meetings a week. I said, let me tell you something, I like this guy, you know? So he's in for a beating, you know what I mean? So I said, I'm gonna have 42 years. I go to 3 to 4 meetings a day. I go to a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning for an hour. I go into work, I go to a 12 o'clock meeting during lunchtime. These are all on Zoom. Mm-hmm. But I was doing this shit, ready for this, before Zoom. I was going to an early morning meeting on the way into work. I would go to the 12 o'clock meeting. I go to a 5:30 meeting after work. And sometimes I go to 8:30 meetings. I was going to meetings. I was doing this stuff because I was first doing it because, well, I happen to be one of these guys that likes meetings and likes AA and likes people and likes sobriety. But also my sponsor would tell me this is what you have to do. He says, my sponsor would say, you go to me, this is what he would say to me whenever I'd say about my feelings. He'd say, Russell, you go to meetings, you feel good. You don't go to meetings, you don't feel so good. I messed around with this thing for 5 years, and then one day I was crying to him, and he looked at me and says, how many meetings you going? He says, what does that have to do with it? He says, Russell, you go to meetings, you feel good. You don't go to meetings, you don't feel so good. On the way home, the attorney with the brain is saying, wait a second, you go to meetings, you feel good. You don't go to meetings, you go to meetings, you feel good. You don't go to meetings, you go to meetings, you feel good. And all of a sudden, it like comes to me like a fucking dream. You go to meetings, you feel good. You don't go to meetings, you don't feel. And I say, I'm going to go to a meeting every morning. And I started going to a lot of meetings. And I started feeling great. There was like a freaking connection. Now, you think this should be obvious, right? This is not obvious to alcoholics. He's going to 2 meetings. So I say, listen, why aren't you doing this? I don't have time, and I don't blah, blah, blah. He says, listen, you have a computer. You got a thing. You can go to Zoom meetings. You know, you get my email. You know all the Zoom meetings. You can go to 3. You can go to 2 meetings. Even if it's just 2, you can do it like all the guys and blah, blah, blah. And this is what he says to me. By the way, he's got 10 years. This is what he says to me. He says, I prefer in-person meetings. You understand what I prefer. I said, who the fuck cares what you prefer? You did 15 years in jail. You understand what I'm saying? You hit the homicide. You don't go to meetings you're going to drink. You obviously don't prefer in-person meeting because you're only going to 2 a week. And this way you can go to like 2 meetings every week. Who cares? But this is, you know what this is? This isn't even him talking. This is alcoholism. It's like you're talking to the wall. I'm talking to the wall. It's like the Wailing Wall over in Israel, you know?
Yeah,
the guy's standing before the Wailing Wall, and he's praying. And he says, what are you praying for? He says, world peace. How's it working? He says, it's like talking to a wall. You know? Forget it, you know?
They got it.
You're talking to an alcoholic. They got it. You're talking to an alcoholic. It's like talking to a wall. If you don't realize talking to an alcoholic is like talking to a wall, you know, you could say whatever you want to say to an alcoholic as strong as possible, beat him over the head, and then they'll start talking to you, and you'll say to yourself, this guy isn't listening to me. He hasn't heard a word I said. While I've been talking to him, he's been thinking what he's going to say back to me. He's not even listening to me. I'm saying like 2 + 2 = 4. And so this is following directions. You do the 8th step. The power is not the 8th step. The 8th step is the access to the power. You do the 9th step with the help of your sponsor. How do I make amends to my ex-wife? It's the access to the power. I know where the power is because in Alcoholics Anonymous, in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, it says the following. This is founders approved shit. It's founders approved, okay? If you got a choice of going with conference approved, I don't even know those guys at the conference. You got a choice of going conference approved or founders approved, I would go with founders approved. So what it says in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Times, it says the books we found absolutely essential to read were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. And in the Sermon on the Mount, it says clearly this, and everything in the big book was gotten from the good book. You just read Dr. Bob and the Good Old Times, you'll understand that. Now, if you've never studied the good book, then you wouldn't even know. You'd think it's like an original thing thought up by Bill Wilson. No, it's not. You know, Bill Wilson was being coached by Sam Shoemaker and Ed Dowling, who was a Jesuit priest. And what it says in the book of Matthew, very clearly in Sermon on the Mount, it says, if you want to get something from God, and you come to God with you want to get something, but you have something against your brother, or he has something against you, he said, forget about coming to God. Go clear it up with your brother first. Your problem with your brother first, and then come back and talk to God. So the 8th and 9th step is about following directions so you can latch on to the power that will allow you to live. That's where it comes from. There is a power. There is one who has all power. Power to live. That one is called God. You want access to him? You're trying to figure out how you can live. You're trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with you. You got 5 years and 10 years, and you're still worried, and you're still lonely, and you're still up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're worried about money, you're worried about this, and you're sitting there with 5 or 10 years working these steps all over the place, and you're trying to figure out, why am I so screwed up? Why am I not better? You know what I mean? You're talking to some new guy, and you say, and you're sincere. You say, look, I know you got problems. I know it's going to be difficult. But I promise you, if you don't drink and you go to me, it's going to be okay. And you know that's true. He says, really? He says, absolutely. If you don't drink and go to me, it's going to be okay. And you're giving him the right information. He's going to do that. And then you get in your car and you drive 3 blocks and you say to yourself, when the fuck is it going to be okay with me? I'm a basket case. And you're trying to figure out how, after 10 years of this stuff, you're still nuts. And you can't understand, you can't understand why after 10 years, you still have all the problems, sort of like many of the problems you had when you had 6 months or 5 years. And they seem so intractable, as you're trudging this road to happy destiny. And so you say things to yourself like, well, it's progress, not perfection. And all the stuff we say to each other to make ourselves not feel so bad. You know what I mean? Which is important. And all that, I'm not putting down that stuff. But I'm saying the answer might be, the 8th step and the 9th step and all these steps are important, but it might be because you actually think that it's the steps that are keeping you sober. Somebody told you it's the steps that are keeping you sober. Somebody told you it's the fellowship that's keeping you sober. Somebody told you it's your sponsor that's keeping you sober. And you know something? That's all true. That's all true. And guess what? That's going to keep you sober for up to around 20 years. That's going to keep you sober for about 20 years. And then you're going to be like all the guys who call me up with 20 years and 25 years and 15 years sobriety, saying I feel like crap, I'm depressed and everything like that. And they're guys that all did the steps and they did everything, and the meetings are boring because they don't talk about what the problems are that they're having. All they talk about is drunkalogs, and they don't hear anything, and they have no idea what's wrong with them. You know why? Because they did all the steps, but they don't believe in God. And God is not the centerpiece of their lives. He's not the central fact. They're not convinced that he lives in this hearts and minds and way, which is remarkable. They didn't quite read that paragraph that you can have an avid conviction and an earnest belief, an earnest religious belief, and your faith can remain barren because God's not the central fact of your life. Because here's the deal. They bought into everything in AA except that they had to be like somebody like Russell, who always proclaims God and talks about God, because that's a little stupid. Because that's not cool. Because believing in God and saying you believe in God is such a fact, it isn't cool. Let me tell you something, I almost died out there trying to be cool. You hang around with a bunch of people that have 45 years, 50 years, who are 70 and 80 years old, who've been through the cancer and everything. You ask them about how it feels to be cool, what their life is all about. You're going to find out they have a different perspective. They're looking at this thing a little bit differently. It's not that they don't do the steps or anything like that. They've turned over their lives. There's nothing holding them back. They're not holding themselves back. They're not worried about what some guy's going to think about them in AA. They're not worried about people walking out of here saying, that guy Russell is stupid, you know what I mean? Boy, I'm an idiot, you know what I'm talking about? Can you imagine talking about all that crap? They're not worried, they don't care what you think about them. You guys worry about that shit. What a crummy life. That's a crummy life to live. You don't want to live that. You didn't come here to live that life, did you?
Nope.
Did you come here to live a life where you're not drinking and worried about what other people are thinking about you? Oh, really? I mean, good Lord. That's the worst. So that